Well, hello and welcome to After the Sermon, a Bethany podcast where we have the privilege of digging deeper into our Sunday messages. I'm Tami DeLau, and today I'm joined with Pastor David Baxley and Pastor Steve Musto. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
So this is exciting. We are starting a new series. So.
Yeah, and I am going to talk more for David today on purpose because our brother is coughing like crazy and trying to get over this thing. Yes. So I may talk a bit more.
Thank you.
Number one, because I like to talk and I like to hear myself talk.
There you go.
And number two, it also helps out my brother.
Yes, I'm going to receive that as a great blessing.
That is a gift to you, David.
It really is.
So,
yeah, we'll see if I can actually submit to that great gift.
There you go. Odds are not. Odds are not. But let's try. I was super excited about what we're doing. When someone says, what is your favorite book of the Bible? I say James. That's our new series. And then I started asking myself last night, why? Why do you like this book so much? Do you even know all that you should know about James? And I remembered I did not grow up in a Christian family. Yeah. So started going to church, and I had an amazing youth pastor, Dave Scherf. Dave and Laura Scherf are significant in my life for making me. And I remembered having some Bible study notes from when I was young. So I went downstairs. I have a prop today, guys. I went downstairs into the depth of our basement, and I found my old Bible study notes from when I was 14 years old. Whoa. And you're going to laugh if you look at this, guys. Look at these questions. They are like old on a typewriter kind of questions. This is what 14-year-old Tami thought. You want to see it? Yeah. I'm kind of hoping some of those questions make it into our girl group questions. That is my goal.
Is there any like Tami Loves Andy stuff on here?
No, I did not know
Mash
Andy.
Game is in the corner.
No.
Your handwriting has not changed a bit.
I still write like a 14-year-old girl.
What is the relationship between a trial and a temptation?
Yes.
Define those for me.
Yep.
Oh, that's good.
I know, it's really good. And so I'm like, wow. And so so it was just super fun for me. Found that.
Wow.
And then also found an old Beth Moore study I did years ago. And so anyway, it was very nostalgic, remembering why I love James. So I'm thrilled that we're...
Martin Luther hated James.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah, opposite. So I'm glad you like it. I do too. I feel the same way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I love it. But it's a little scattered.
Okay.
And he didn't like it because it was like a little too practical and a little light on theology. Mm-hmm.
He was contending with works-based salvation.
Yeah.
And he felt it, instead of seeing the beauty of these two worlds coming together, he saw it as the contrast because he was fighting such a bad theology at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you do, it's telling you what to do. Yeah.
Did he breathe his last breath not loving James? Did he ever grow to love James?
No. And here's the problem with Martin Luther.
It's going a different place.
This is not where we were going to go.
He's one of those guys that like, if he had just passed like 10 years sooner, he would have... It would have been.
He would have finished well.
Legacy. Yeah,
better.
Okay. I mean, he was always anti-Semitic.
Yes,
but it got much worse as he got older. Kind of like Grandpa gets a little cranky and says things like, "Grandpa, you can't use those words anymore. You can't say stuff like that." That's true. Yeah, his writing took on that flavor, and
that's unfortunate. Yeah. Okay, so you are going to be in James chapter 1.
Yep.
Verses 1 through 18.
Yes.
I'm just going to read the first verse because I have a question after the first verse.
Okay.
Are you guys ready? So here we go. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes dispersed abroad, greetings. 12 tribes. Yeah. This is the New Testament.
Right.
Help people understand.
Yeah.
Why is that there? What does that mean?
So James, we believe, is the half-brother of Jesus. This is the one who spent a chunk of his life skeptical that Jesus was the Messiah and then figured it out.
And figured it out after Jesus' death? Or do we not know that?
We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know. James is probably the first book written of the New Testament.
Okay.
It was written roughly around 45. Okay. So just 15 years... give or take, after the death and resurrection of Christ. Okay. So really early.
Okay.
And James is the pastor, the leader of the church in Jerusalem. So let's go through our our New Testament history and remember what's going on in Jerusalem. So they're undergoing persecution, but they grow super, super fast, right?
And at this point, they're Jews. For the most part, they're Jews.
This is a Jewish movement.
Okay.
Yeah, that is
a big deal.
That's an important
Okay.
note. Yes.
Huge and very, very few Gentiles. Occasionally they're Gentiles, but they're rare.
Okay.
It's mostly Jewish, mostly a Jewish movement. And so you see them going to the synagogues, going to the temple, still practicing the holidays and, the holy days. And that's just part of what they do. Even Paul is doing that, later on. But what happens in the church? Well, Stephen gets martyred. And right after Stephen gets martyred, Acts tells us is that the church, there's this dispersion of people. They undergo, for the first time, they get kind of permission from Rome. The Jewish leaders get permission from Rome to go ahead and officially try to stamp out Christianity. So the persecution or the difficulty goes from like, well, I'm not going to do business with you anymore in the market because you're a Christian, or my kids are not going to play with your kids, or I'm going to look at you funny, or I'm going to, call in this loan that you owe me or whatever.
But you could still exist.
But you can still exist to all of a sudden, like, we need you to recant. Like, you need to recant on this, or you are going to get thrown into prison or maybe lose your life.
And we see this in Paul.
Yes.
In his life, being at the stoning of Stephen, and what he begins to do, we read about in Acts, is an extension of that and what was kind of happening, starting to happen on a bigger scale.
Okay, so I don't even know if this is a fair question, but do we know that Stephen was a Jewish man?
Yes.
We do know that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So what happens then is that it's called the diaspora, the dispersion.
Okay.
So the church, James goes from pastoring a church. I always feel bad for him. He goes from pastoring this like mega church with thousands of people in it and overseeing all these like little mini congregations and small groups and the whole thing. And they're like gone, like overnight. People just run for all parts of the Roman Empire to get out of Jerusalem. And it looks like this terrible thing. And the Jewish leaders are like, great, we stamped it out. No, what they actually did was they just spread it to all corners of the Roman Empire. And so
the fire spread.
Yeah, there is in the first verse what we're told that so the 12 tribes are the Jewish people scattered around, and what we learn is that this is a model of what James is going to talk about itself, that there's a trial, there's a difficulty, there's a challenge, but God actually uses it for this really good purpose to do this amazing thing.
Okay.
And that's what happens. And so, yes, Paul is there at the stoning of Stephen. He is there as a young rabbi giving his approval that this is okay.
And believing with all of his being that he is doing the right thing, that he is protecting.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So with that explanation, then this next verse makes a little more sense, even though it's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
I'm going to read from 2 to 8 now. Consider it great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. Now, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, without doubting, for the doubter is like the surging sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord, being double-minded and unstable in all ways.
Yeah.
So this would be like Dave Scherf, one of my all-time favorite pastors. I get a letter from him. I miss him. I'm so excited to see him. And I'm waiting to be encouraged. And he tells me to consider it great joy.
Right.
When that is not the first line of a letter that I would want to read from Dave Scherf.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's remember a couple things. One is that the Jewish people who are scattered around are not being persecuted in the sense that they will be persecuted later. Their lives are not in danger. They're not being put into the Colosseums yet. None of that is going on. This is early. This is still that like, my kids are not going to play with your kids kind of thing.
So it's feeling like it felt in Jerusalem. until the Roman Empire said, stamp them out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And they're already weird because they're Jews and they're living in a lot of Gentile cities and they have weird religious rituals. They only worship one God. Everybody knows that there's more than one God.
They don't shave their forelock,
the sides of their head. Yeah. Bizarre. Everything is bizarre.
They're wearing
already.
things on their heads, their wrists. Yeah.
And so they're already outcasts. And now this is like a special sect of Judaism. They're not even called Christians yet.
Okay.
The name hasn't even come up. And so they're just this sect of that thing. So these are like the worst of the worst. Like bad enough we got to put up with the Jewish people. Now we got to put up with you guys, and you guys like eat and drink flesh and blood. Isn't that what I heard something about that? Isn't that what you guys do? And so all of this kind of thing is going on. Nobody really understands. So they're being discriminated against in every way, and things are bad. And they don't have a government or rules or laws or anything that are like civil rights. They don't have any civil rights. They're not citizens. And now they're living far from home. So that's the specific kind of thing that they're undergoing. They're not suffering in the sense of they're in danger.
Okay.
Mostly.
Yeah, and I would add mostly that just because what Paul was doing. When we look at, he was still arresting people. He was still putting people in jail. It wasn't the type of, you're right, it's not the Colosseum narrative. It's not this great, but there's still need to run and hide, and you do worry about the safety of your kids, even in what someone might do to them, because they didn't have protection, they didn't have rights, and you are keeping it a secret. That's great. That's a good addition.
They were definitely in a storm, but they weren't in the eye of the storm that was coming.
It's interesting you say that, because probably at this point it feels like the worst the storm can get. And it kind of puts perspective too. In our, when we think about these type of things.
So James's comment is, you're right. You get a letter from your pastor, hopefully your beloved pastor, who's going to encourage you and tell you this, and you can't wait to open it. And what you read is, this is a good thing. This is a cause for joy. And that line, that sentence, usually even today, we say that line and we stop. And we don't keep going. We say, consider it pure joy, when my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. And we stop. And that advice is not helpful.
No, it's not.
That is not going to heal anybody or help anybody. And so that's where we can't take scripture out of context. We got to look at it in its full context. So that's what comes next.
Okay.
And James says, it's not really about, of course, what you're undergoing is not a good thing. It's what it can produce.
So I think that's a good place to stop, because I know I have been guilty of this, even in my own life, even some self-talk that I've done in my life. And maybe because of hearing this narrative, even from childhood, probably growing up, is that somehow I'm not a mature Christian if I don't think the suffering is good. And I think there's a lot of people that somehow feel like there's something wrong with them, like they're a less Christian. Because look at that guy over there, I'm suffering and this is a good thing, and I'm glad I'm suffering. And there's people that put on that persona. And then the others feel like, well, I don't think it's good. I must not be a good Christian. And then someone quotes this verse. I mean, I think there's a lot of Christians that feel a little shame and guilt because that's the narrative they've been told this verse is telling them.
Right. Yeah. I've told my wife, those people that we've encountered that are like on their 4th round of cancer treatments and they just have a smile on their face and a verse for everything. I just want you to know I'm not going to be one of those people. I don't think I'm going to be that person. I'm going to be kind of miserable and surly. And some of that I'm sure is personality. Some of it is probably the Holy Spirit giving you joy. But how many pages of the Bible do we have to rip out if we're going to say that you have to be happy in the midst of everything you undergo? Because David laments. The Psalms are filled with lament. Solomon Ecclesiastes is filled with lament. Isaiah and Jeremiah is
we have
filled
a book
with
called Lamenting.
Right.
That's right.
Yes.
I think so often, though, Christianity is sold as "don't worry, be happy,"
Yeah.
and that's not what we're seeing right
Nope.
here.
We are not seeing that. So,
But we're also not seeing that we can be thankful for the circumstances. We can be thankful in the circumstances, but not.
Yeah.
It's okay to not like your broken bone.
right.
Yes, that's good, Tami.
But I don't know that we always hear that.
I don't have to say, thank God my arm is dangling from my.
But I remember years ago reading a book that challenged that I needed to be thankful for the hard, not in the hard. I'm not sure that I agree with that theologically. What do you think of that?
It's such a fine line. I think it's different
line.
things for different people. It's hard to know. I think the easiest way to understand it is this. Let's say you get a bonus from work, unexpected money. You didn't know you were going to get this, and it arrives. You can do one of a couple things. You can either just like spend it and hey, we're going on vacation, whatever, or you can take that and say we didn't expect to get it anyway, so we're going to put it away and invest it. Now, when you do that and you invest, you put it in your IRA, you put it in whatever. You're missing. You didn't expect to get the money, but now you're missing the money and you're aware that it's in there. Oh, we could have done this. We could have done this. We could have done this. But what you're doing is you're putting it away. And hopefully, much later, that money has grown into something you could not have imagined. Right. More money than you ever put in there. And that's kind of the picture that James is painting for us, is that something comes along. And even though it doesn't feel like a good thing, and we want to do something with that in the moment, if we will process it in the right way, if we'll do something with it and have the right perspective of it and deal with it and put it away into a place, the investment that will grow as a result is bigger than what we can imagine. And this is what we miss. Because when it's like, don't worry, be happy, it's because what's behind that sometimes is because God, we should be thankful because God is a good God, and don't you dare not be thankful. And it's almost like you have it so good, you should feel good about this, and God doesn't like it when we're unhappy. And I don't know what's behind that. It's kind of a strange thing. Instead of looking at it from James's perspective, and so that's what we'll unpack on Sunday is what is the good of this? When something does happen, Jesus, we just got done with this series on Jesus undergoing temptation. And this is a spiritual trial. So as Satan comes along, he wants to tempt. God doesn't tempt, he tests. And so God turns this into this spiritual test for Jesus that builds something in him, grows something in him, and allows him to leave that experience, that wilderness experience, and have something that he didn't have before. And he's had this experience, not only an experience, but he's grown something in his own resolve. Remember, his human side is being tempted, not his deity side. This is where it gets complicated.
Because we're going to read, if we keep going in here, we're going to read that God cannot be tempted.
God can't be tempted.
And so there are some that are going to be like, wait a minute, how can that be? So you're speaking to that. It was Jesus' human side that was being tempted, not his divine.
Correct.
And to say side is even wrong, because it's like he's I know.
We're limited by our language.
So come back to those Christian platitudes, because I think as you were talking, Steve, I was thinking back. Not only do they, you asked the question, why do we do that? And so I was processing that over here. We do it because we're really uncomfortable with suffering. We do it because we're really uncomfortable with that pain. And you're going to talk about this message, how quickly we want to avoid, whether you're the one experiencing the pain or even the one watching someone experiencing, you want to fix that problem. And little do we realize, in quoting the verse wrong, not only are we denying what it should be and keeping someone from being able to be honest with themselves, we actually could be getting in the way of the work of God. Yeah. Because we need that pain as a part of what God is going to bring about. We can still say this stinks. We can still say this is hard. But when we try to just put the Band-Aid over it to say, no, it's fine, don't feel pain. No, it's fine, don't feel pain. We're almost saying, don't experience what God is working in your life. So we actually come against the Spirit of God and the work he's doing.
That's exactly right.
So I think what I heard you saying when you're talking about interest in IRAs, when we ourselves don't put whatever's going on into the savings account, we aren't going to reap. When we stop someone from going to the bank, putting that in the savings account with God, we are robbing them of
letting them feel the pain, letting them experience the hard.
And I think part of the reason we do that, I have a dear friend who walked hard. She had a child with a brain injury and then a husband who had cancer. But during that brain injury part, she lost a lot of friends because it is hard to be with someone that's grieving. And when someone is grieving, they say things that you're like, whoa, you can't say that. We're an instant society. We want our Big Mac and we want it now. I think that's part of the problem, you know?
Even as I say that, I'm feeling convicted because I know I am one that, especially with the ones closest to me, you know, with my own wife, with my kids, like how often I want to try to solve that problem instead of join them in their problem, in their pain, to join with what God is doing. I want to fix it. And why? Because I'm uncomfortable and I get in the way of what God is doing, or throw a verse down that's wrong. And now I'm painting a wrong picture of God. Man, I can just feeling like, wow, I've been a part of that in my own life, my own experiences.
So we've created an entire theology around suffering. The most well-known, popular TV preachers all have have the same theology around suffering, which is that if you are suffering, it's your fault. God only wants to ever bless us, ever. So if you're experiencing pain, if you're experiencing cancer, if you're experiencing financial loss, whatever it is, it's because you are not being faithful. It's because you are not doing something right. See, we're taking this thing that God, this tool that God can use in our lives to build us, to build our faith, to build spiritual stamina in us. And we want to short circuit it because we think the answer to pain is to stop it. That's the answer.
Yeah.
And look, Jesus had a great ministry of relieving pain. There was a lot of pain that he relieved. He walked around relieving, thousands of people were relieved of pain. So it's not that he wants us to live in pain. It's that pain produces something. Difficulty produces something that nothing else does. Right. We say it all the time. The people who have been through something, like you talk to them and you go, well, they've been through something. You know that they've been through something,
and you see it in their if they've been through it and held God's hand through it. Some people have been through something and they are bitter and angry. Yeah, so
that's true.
Well, I think of the young man that was born blind, and what that theology was present then. Because what did they say to him? Who sinned, God? Him or his parents that he was born blind? And you just hear the false theology coming out in that moment that we're still dealing with today. Yeah. But Jesus' response isn't that, well, it just happens, but I'm here to fix it. It's, well, this happened so that God. And yet he wasn't removing that God wasn't still a part of that, but that God had great purpose for that. And he doesn't deny the hard. And Jesus does come and heal. But the man lived years in a part of God's process in his life to bring him to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, this is the problem of pain is one of the quintessential problems in all of philosophy and religion. It's just, it's always a challenge. And we want to answer it.
Why? That's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you'll speak to that on Sunday.
I will a little bit. Why, I have a friend who, he and his wife went through, they had a really hard time with getting pregnant, and then it took years, and then finally she did. And when the baby was born, the baby died immediately. And it was just a heartbreak. And my friend, who's their pastor, showed up and walked into the room, and they both looked at him, and he just said this: there is no why. Do not chase why. They hadn't even asked him a question. They hadn't said anything. Do not chase why. the answer at the end of why is not going to satisfy you. No. That's not what this is.
Right.
And so
pastor.
my friend who, it was his child who died, said to me later, it was exactly what in that moment, what we needed. That's all that was on our minds was why would God allow this? And hearing that enabled us to keep turning to each other throughout the grief that followed and go, chasing why is not the answer.
There's no why.
Yeah. There's no why that's going to satisfy us, even if we know what it is. Even if God took the time to explain it, it's not going to satisfy us.
I think of the story of Joseph. We're in the Bible recap right now with the women's ministry and a lot of our men are doing it too in our grow groups. We're doing it in our grow group. And so it's been a really cool thing to do, but we just kind of finished Genesis and we're now in Exodus. But thinking of how Joseph speaks at the very end of Genesis, the last chapter about, as he's talking to his brothers, what he went through. And I think sometimes we see Joseph's answer as, well, you did meant for evil. God was actually doing for good. That doesn't mean Joseph said it was all good. It doesn't mean Joseph was then saying, oh, never mind, it's all fine. Who cares? It all worked out for it. We look at that. Right. I don't think Joseph necessarily said that when he got in jail. I don't think as Joseph was thrown into the pit, he's like, God is doing a good thing right now. I don't think as he was sold to slavery, God is doing a good thing. I'm just going to trust God and it's going to feel good. It took how many years for him to get to a place of realizing that. And if he tries to chase the why, the why doesn't come. And even if God had said, well, Joseph, I'm doing this for you right now, because in like 25, 30, 40, 50 years, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. So that is why all this has happened. I think we would have said, forget that, God. Right. Yeah. Can I just go back to my dad and then we'll just deal with the famine when it, whatever the answer is. And I think that's what you're talking about. The why won't help us now.
Yeah.
And
No, so when I was reading that last week, I wonder, what did Jacob think when he found out that his beloved son was really alive? And did he spend moments being mad at his son's first?
Absolutely.
I mean, and we don't get to see that side of the story.
And a God.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
He did. And there's a part of him that sees I get it. This is the only way we're getting food. This is the only way God is going to sustain us.
But he lost years with his son.
Years. Yes. Yeah, he's mad at his other sons.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was just talking to a young lady going through a really hard thing right now, and she can see how this hard thing is, what it's producing her. And she can see what God is doing. And she's like, but I'm still mad at God. And it's like, you can hold both right now. You're allowed to hold both. Pretending you're not mad at God. God's like, you don't have to fake it with me. In fact, the fact you can even hold both hands right in your hands right now is a really good place with God. You can say, I'm frustrated. I don't get the why. This doesn't make sense. I can even see what you were doing, but why is that the way you had to get me there?
Right.
And though that answer will not come, let's just be honest that those tensions are there instead of throwing half of a line of a Bible verse. And or some version of false. Well, you put yourself here, but God fixed it later. I mean, neither is going to bring comfort in that.
Christianity is holding ideas in tension all the time. Yep. It's about being able to say, hey, the world is God created this world, and it's a rotten place at times, and there are corners of it that are terrible, and we can't explain why these things are happening to the most innocent. And we hold these things in it, but God is still good, and He's perfect, and He's all powerful. All these things are tensions that we hold in our hands all the time.
All the time.
Without resolution. Yep. And we're not going to find that resolution. Right. And quit trying to tell people resolutions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if we have enough time, but there's a couple phrases that I wonder if we should explain. As we read on, we're going to see crown of life. Yeah. Crown of life.
So we'll touch on this just briefly. Ultimately what James says is all the things you're going through here, there's a spiritual benefit to them, and not just here. There's a spiritual benefit to them in heaven. There is a reward in heaven. We almost use this as a joke in Christianity. Like, you serve for 2 services in nursery because someone didn't show up. Hey, your reward's in heaven.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
extra jewel in your crown.
Right. Yeah, something like that. But what's true is that there's something about the things that we do in this world, they do continue to echo into eternity. They really do. And we are given rewards in heaven that we don't really understand.
Yeah.
Do you think the Jewish people understood that better, that there's a physical and a spiritual more than we do wrap our heads around?
They had a very different view of what we think of as heaven.
Yes.
Okay.
They didn't really believe in heaven the way we do.
Okay.
And so, and that was not taught. If you read the Old Testament, it really wasn't taught to them.
So another phrase is first fruit. We're going to see first fruit.
Yep. So the first fruits are when you bring, he's using Jewish language. So the first fruits are your offering to God.
Yeah.
It's the thing taken right off the top that you would give to God as your offering to him. And so when James says it,
Let's read it in content. That's
Verse 18.
When James says it, he says, he gave us birth by the word of truth so that we would be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. He's basically saying that we would be the best part. And go back to Genesis. We know that humans are built as the pinnacle of God's creation to rule all other creatures and to have dominion over the earth.
So he wasn't saying, hey, we're the first Christians, we're the best, the rest to come are not the first fruit. He was saying we are all the first fruit. I'm just curious.
I think there's room to say, that's a really good point. I think there's room to say that James is saying we're the first generation of this thing, this movement. We are the ones who know.
Okay.
There are people who are reading James. A lot of people reading James personally knew Jesus. They were friends with him. They followed him. They sold everything to be with him. They saw the crucifixion. They whatever, and they have stories to tell. It's like, Uncle Bob, tell the story about when you met Jesus that time. Well, and then he tells the story. You know, it's a story that we don't even have in the Bible. It's just an experience he had with Jesus. So I think there's room to say that absolutely.
But if they were giving their best to God, knowing that it was an offering, it was a sacrifice at some level, it could be boastful, but it also could be we are sacrificing for what's coming.
Yes.
And I want to believe that was more of their heart. I want to think better of them.
They have a sacrifice culture. We don't.
Right.
Yeah.
They have a sacrifice culture. They were used to, so, we live in Wisconsin, it's farmland. People who grew up on a farm understand this better, but they were used to raising creatures helping them be born and then slitting their throats later on as a sacrifice.
Right.
They saw that. It was a violent time. I mean, it's a rough and tumble time. Even combat was not precise combat. It was hand to hand. So everything about that world was messy and very tactile. So they understood sacrifice because they would sacrifice. So that language is throughout all of Jewish literature.
So you are covering a big chunk this week. Is there anything else before we need to close that you're like, man, I really want to touch that before?
Yeah.
I always feel bad for you guys because you study and if we could just like download your brains to us, it would be wonderful.
I
you
just
get
this morning,
30 minutes. That's all you get.
This morning I took out a chunk. I took out a huge chunk of stuff that we're just not going to have time to get to. And, and it's the kind of thing that, it's really interesting to me, but I don't know if it's interesting to anybody else. I think the main takeaway for like, grow group leaders, for people in grow group, for those who are going to be listening on Sunday, whatever it might be, one of the main things that we have to take away is we need to make sure that we are understanding when we're going through something, we need to recognize what we're going through. We need to at some point go, wait a second, looking around. This is a test. This is a trial. I'm undergoing something here, and I need to respond accordingly. We don't really have this language much. I think I said on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, I felt like there was something that happened, and I turned to Kathy and I said, "Oh, this is a test. I need to pass this test." And it was just this little moment in time.
Yeah.
And And I recognize these come up once in a while. Something happens and I need to say this out loud. I need to do this. I need to confess this thing because it's going to grow in me. If it doesn't, I'm in the midst of something that I can't quite overcome this in this relationship with somebody. I think it's a test. I think God wants me to pass this test. Jesus says to Peter, Simon, look, Satan has requested permission to sift you. It's a test. I'm praying that you pass a test. It's a test. We need to get used to that kind of language, that they can be small little things. They don't need to be years long, months long. They can be moments.
So we need to do that for ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, because I think you've done this for me. I know I was facing something and you looked at me as your sister and you said, Tam, this is a test. That's language we don't speak to one another.
Yeah.
That's rare that we would do that. So not only do we need to recognize these things as tests, we need to help our brothers and sisters see them as tests too.
And you passed that test.
I did pass that test.
Yeah, praise God.
That was good.
Yeah.
All right. So next week we are doing James 1, 19 through 27, if people want to read ahead. Our time is flashing, so we have to end. I could do this all day with you guys. And you did well, David. You didn't have a
you didn't
coughing.
cough.
No, I'm very surprised. I'm remaining very calm as I sit here tonight.
Pray for us as the camera turns off.
It's going to get bad.
It's going to be a lot of cough.
Yes, it may happen.
So thank you guys, and thank you for joining us. Have a great week. Bye-bye.